Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Signum Symposium. We are happy today to talk about the humanities. This is something we've been talking a lot about Signum lately, is sort of the situation with the humanities, both the need for the humanities and sort of what we can do about it. Really happy to be joined today by three of our Signum Path instructors. This is Robbie Park, joining us from Kansas City, Gabriel Schenk, joining us from Oxford, and Sara Brown, joining us from Wales. And I, of course, am Corey Olsen, joining you from New Hampshire. So just to give a little bit of background, a lot of you know this story, but Signum, we have been operating in a very focused niche, right? Our program so far, our master's degree program, our starting program, has been focused on Tolkien studies and fantasy literature and science fiction literature, and Signum has been growing, and it was time for us to grow, to find a larger niche, so I personally, as the president of the institution, was doing a lot of soul searching last year, trying to say, not just like what can we do, not just a simple like what is the most practical way for us to move forward, but like, where are their needs? Where can Signum do good? That was, after all, what led to Signum, right? Was seeing a need, seeing a niche that needed to be filled, right? So I really began kind of looking around to see what is out there. What can we, what can we do that isn't just trying to find the most cunning angle, and really what kind of needs can we fill? And the thing that really brought itself to my attention was the need in the humanities, right? Seeing the one basic kind of or rather two related observations, right? That where simultaneously, on the one hand, was seeing that the humanities themselves have been in a state of crisis for some time now, and that crisis is only getting worse, and of course is reaching some fairly acute levels right now in higher education. That humanities programs are being reduced, they're being cut, and even those that are surviving are having some really uncomfortable pressures being put on them, right? The kind of ultimatum that's being directed, well, it's an ultimatum that's being directed across higher education, but it's a particularly uncomfortable and inappropriate one in many ways to be directing at the humanities, is to say, like, prove that students can get a really high and immediate return on investment. Like, show us what high-paying jobs your studies will ease students into, and if you can't, we're cutting funding to you, and we're reallocating our funding to those departments which can really show that, which can really promise to students lucrative jobs waiting for them after graduation if you major in that, right? And that situation it wrong-foots the humanities in a very, very serious way, and has led to all kinds of difficulties, both in places where the humanities aren't surviving and in places where the humanities are, again, trying to adapt and respond to these challenges and answer these questions, and therefore contort themselves in ways which are not real good in the end for the teaching of the humanities. So that was one thing I was noticing, this increasingly acute crisis in the humanities across higher education. The other thing, which is really interesting in association, is the fact that lots and lots of people within the sort of world of industry, right, within the business world, have been complaining that there's been this continual drop-off in the basic communication skills and interpersonal skills that people have. There's a real gap, and people are wringing their hands and saying, why is it that nobody can write anymore? Why is it so hard for people to present? Why do we have such dysfunctional offices where people can't operate well in meetings and don't know how to handle each other and everything? and again, I'm not laying claim to any like remarkable flash of insight for myself of connecting those two dots and saying, maybe maybe there's a correlation here. Maybe the one problem is, I don't think it's necessarily just as simple as a simple cause and effect relationship, but clearly there are some links between these two things. That is what has really informed these new directions that I've been talking about now for Signum University since last fall. The new directions that we're planning to go, because this is where I do think that, there are some needs that we can fill. Signum Path, of course, is our new program in which we're trying to address what is, I think, in a sense, the more readily addressable issue, right? It's kind of easier to reach out to people who need help with their skills, right? With their communication skills and stuff. Reforming how higher education does the humanities is a longer term project, right? And we're thinking about that too, and we may come back around to talking about that as well. But the first and most immediate thing that we felt that we could do was to try to make an impact right away for the benefit of folks who do really struggle with kind of the aftermath of the humanities situation. So Robbie, Gabriel, and Sara have all been teaching our Path courses. We launched our public enrollment for our Path classes in June. For our June month was our classes are monthly. June was our first month. All three of them have been teaching courses now in June, July, and August. We'd love to hear from you guys about your experiences so far. Let me let you guys kind of introduce yourselves and some of the courses that you've been teaching and the stuff that you've been working on in particular about these things, to sort of provide some context, and then we can you guys can sort of share some reflections that you guys have had on these things. Robbie, I could start with you to tell us a little bit about yourself and the classes you've been teaching.
Yeah, so my name is Robbi Park, and I have a personal stake in this matter because I have a bachelor's and a master's in history, both of which I've been informed are completely useless. So, I have a huge stake in this. But I've been teaching, courses since June. I've been teaching, well, right now, this month, I've been doing leadership and followership. I also did conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, powerful presentations, and one other course, and I'm totally blanking out on it. Oh, marketing yourself. So I've done 5 courses so far in Path, and it's been a really great experience so far. I mean, in the process of all 5 of these courses, I've had a lot of discussions about a lot of the things that you've just talked about in terms of why our office is so dysfunctional. Why is it that people can't seem to communicate well at all? Why don't people spend more time thinking about these skills? And it's because, honestly, there just aren't courses that are offered that address some of these things. Instead, they're sort of buried in other courses in the humanities. I can definitely come up with ways that critical analysis and thinking has been included in history, but there's definitely no dedicated course for critical thinking in my undergrad and even in my master's experience, I would say. So, but it's been a really great experience so far. So I'll let others introduce themselves before I blather on more.
Great. Sara, go ahead.
Sure. I'm Sara Brown, and I've been working for Signum anyway since 2012, mostly within the language and literature faculty on master's degree programs. But I got sucked into doing Path by Corey because it actually did not take a lot of persuasion, because he said, here is this gap. And I went, yes, you're right. And it kind of went from there. So the sorts of courses I've been teaching on, one of them was called Nuts and Bolts. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's all about those tiny little fundamentals of writing that nobody gets taught once they leave school. And in fact, most people don't get really taught these fundamentals even when they're in the upper years of high school. Right. There comes a point where there seems to be a line drawn where educators seem to think, well, we've taught you how to spell, and we've taught you how to do grammar, and we've taught you how to punctuate, off you go. And that's not the case. It really isn't. So what we have is adults in the workplace who really have never been taught how to do some of these fundamentals well. They might have a basic grasp of them, although I have met some people who are very challenged on the semicolon, but they need to brush up on these skills, because in this day and age where one of the main things in which people communicate in business is via electronic means, sometimes that first handshake is not in person. It's an email or a letter or something that is a written communication. And so it represents you and it represents your business. And if it is not well written in the fundamentals, you better believe the reader is judging you. So that, I think, has been a really interesting course, because some people who've been on the course have suddenly come to an understanding of just how many gaps they have in those fundamentals.
Yes.
So that was a really interesting course. The second course I did was writing as process, when we looked at taking information and scouring information and getting the real fundamentals of what is needed out of that information. How do you do that well? How do you scan vast amounts of information and take just what you need? But then how do you take it from one text type and turn it into a different text type? So we looked at how you write good reports, the difference between an email and a memo. What is a memo for? Why do we actually have them? So we're looking at those business communication text types. So that was good. And then the third and final path course I've been doing is Mastering Media. And here's another thing that people take for granted. We're all online. We're online all the time. For some of us, that's our job, is very much of it is online. And yet, who sat you down and taught you how to be media literate? Did anybody actually explain to anybody? How many people have taken a class in how to recognize when a source that you find online is not valid and what you do about that? So that's what we do on the Mastering Media course, is looking at how we can actually not just safely surf the internet, but also use the internet really well. Okay, so yep, that's the three courses I've been on, and I'll pass it on to Gabriel.
Hi, yeah, thank you. So my name is Gabriel Schenk, and I did my PhD in English literature at Oxford, and then I tried to get a job in the real world. And I remember going for a job interview at Oxford University Press, and some of the feedback afterwards was, don't mention the PhD because it's irrelevant. And that was at, Oxford University Press. And I just thought there's something has gone wrong here. And I think it's probably something that's gone wrong in the university level and the corporate level. And I have, since worked in jobs where people have recognized what a PhD in English literature is worth. And of course, I don't think you have to have a PhD, but in order to get a job. But it has some value, as do other degrees in the humanities, and it represents certain skills that you've developed. So yeah, I kind of know what it's like to have the punchline of higher education, which is, well, okay, we're going to ignore this now. And then I started teaching at Signum University in the master's program. And that was a real delight, because the students at Signum University tend to be people who are working alongside their studies, or they're retired. So they've got there's not much of a university bubble at Signum. The students are really fascinating. They bring a lot of expertise from their own lives, from their working lives. In the recent course I taught, we had two priests. We had someone working in Italy, someone working in Greece who ran a business. So it was fantastic. And I remembered the first course I taught. on Gothic literature, there was a student who is an engineer, very, very high up engineer at an organization, and she said that she was writing a report and she realized that she was writing it in a different way because of the skills she was developing writing about Gothic literature. And so, for me, Path felt quite new in some ways to begin with, but actually it's old hat for us. We've been doing this for years. Well, some of us have been doing it for much longer than me. But yeah, if there was a way of getting those skills that you get from humanities education without necessarily having to spend 3 months reading novels and applying Burke's theory of the sublime to Bram Stoker's Dracula or whatever, writing all those assignments, that's good, but it's
not the only mechanism for doing that, you're saying, yeah.
And it's not maybe the most efficient way of getting those skills either, but it's good. I'm not knocking the masters. So yeah, it was really great to teach in the Path program, and as well as teaching at Signum University, I also work as a grants writer for Ashinaga UK, which is a Japanese charity that works with students from the region of sub-Saharan Africa. So I mention that because I'm not sort of this crusty old academic. You see them walking around Oxford sometimes, and they get the cobwebs wafting off them or whatever. We have, and the same is true for everyone else here. We certainly know how to apply our skills in the humanities to the world outside academia as well. So we've seen the value of that. And I've been able to use my academic skills and my non-academic skills in the teaching that I've been doing in Path. So there's been 3 courses.
Oh dear.
Uh-oh. We seem to have lost Gabriel there for a second.
Gremlins in the internet. Again.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Well, we will come back.
Am I back yet?
You're back now. There you go.
I'm back now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. If I go again, just continue on without me. But yeah, I was saying, yeah, two-way communication. Everyone thinks they know how to communicate, but actually, there are times if you've met a really good communicator, it's like they have a magic power. Like they to feel like you're really being listened to feel like you don't need to explain things lots of times. It's an incredible skill to learn. So that's what we develop in that course. There's also a course on time management, which is self-explanatory but surprisingly complex and interesting. We get into the psychology of time management there, which is really fascinating, and develop lots of skills and methods for improving one's management of time. And then thirdly, there's a course called Influencing Your Audience, which is all about a particular kind of persuasive way of communication. How do you get people to do things for you, like or with you, or how do you persuade people? And if you can unlock that, then the world is your oyster, and you can get ahead in whatever work you're doing. I think these skills are really applicable across the spectrum.
Yes, that's really, to me, the most remarkable thing. And again, even thinking back to the kind of original concept of why it would be so useful and so valuable to be working through the humanities in the way that we are, is that the kinds of skills that we're talking about, I mean, the kinds of skills that we focus on in the Path program, these kinds of skills which have been, traditionally, really developed best through the humanities, they are so universally applicable. It's part of the irony, right? Like this, they're not skills which lead to a particular job. They are skills which apply to, there isn't a single job you could possibly have in which, any job, any kind of, you can't be a gas station attendant and not like benefit from having better communication skills, and these other things that we're talking about. So it's really the universality of it creates this sort of paradox with the humanities, right? Where there is the general perception that they're useless, right? Or, you know, a lot of people kind of feel like that, and a lot of people are told that this is useless. But of course, the irony is that it's not only that they're not useless, it's that they are more broadly useful. They're more broadly applicable than any other kind of skill. There's, you know, no matter how focused you know, the training you might get and how relevant it might seem in a particular sphere, it's still of only limited applicability, of limited usefulness. So yeah, I think that's such a really important part of things. Robin, did you want to talk more about the courses that you've taught, maybe to sort of kind of fill in a little bit? I know you listed them before, but I would love to hear a little bit more about your courses.
Well, in one of the badges I worked on in particular was the person-to-person badge, and that's more where we talk about things that are, I think, traditionally considered like soft skills. You know, what we've talked about in the past is that term, soft skills. But in that badge, it's leadership and followership, conflict resolution, and emotional intelligence. I mean, I think more than ever I've seen in the past, I think especially with the growth of the internet, I see a huge need for people to become more emotionally intelligent. It seems like as people are becoming more just constantly tethered to the internet, that I see a huge increase in terms of not just grammar errors, which Sara, I think your classes are incredibly important for that reason. It's crazy. You'd think that the grammar errors would actually go down because you would think that you're getting corrected more often when you're texting and stuff, but it just does not seem to happen at all. But also I feel like there's just a lot more, like there's a huge lack in terms of soft skills. People don't know how to talk to each other as much anymore. They don't think as much outside of their own bubble. They definitely don't think outside of whatever the echo chamber is that they've kind of accumulated and curated in their social media feed and their news feed and all this stuff. So in those three courses in particular, we talk a lot about that, about sort of the more human approach to relationships, of how to communicate with other people and just to become more aware of what we're thinking and feeling and how others are thinking and feeling. Because I think definitely in the past 10 years, it just seems like the quality of conversation has really changed. I'm not necessarily saying it's gotten worse, but it's definitely changed a lot. So in that badge in particular, there's a huge focus on that. And then the other thing that, you know, when I left my master's program to go out into the real world, to go apply for jobs, you know, which Gabriel, I think I went through kind of a similar issue where I got kind of told, don't even bring the fact that you have a master's. No one wants to hear that, and you're not going to be paid more just because you have a master's. That doesn't mean anything, basically. You know, the one course from the Strengthen Your Core badge, which is marketing yourself, I really did not know how to do that when I left grad school, because I feel like in grad school in particular, things are very insular. It's just like if you're in grad school, then your goal is to just be in grad school forever and just be a professor and live on campus. And that's like what you do. But there are, of course, supposedly other opportunities out there for you that your degrees give you, that there's this way, you know, much wider playing field out there for you. But if you don't know how to market yourself to that, then you're never going to know what that is. If you have a master's in history, for example, then you can only teach history. That's it. But for some reason, when they try to get students to enroll in the program, they tell you, yeah, it's very versatile. You can do tons of things with this degree. But then they don't actually educate you on how you should market yourself for those opportunities. Yes. So that was a huge highlight for me, actually teaching that course. And helping students to figure out how they can find other areas like that they can be more applicable toward. So that was a huge treat getting to teach that course. But it was something like I wished had existed in both, I would say definitely both the undergrad and the graduate side. I mean, I did not get any of that. And I don't really understand why it isn't sort of more woven into the you know, the course of study in general. But yeah, so marketing yourself actually worked really well also with the other course that I taught, which was powerful presentations, because most people just are not capable of giving like really great presentations. They can get up and kind of talk for 20 minutes and just sort of ramble a little bit, you know, and then they may even just sort of black out and not really remember that they did it. which is what one student told me, that apparently they were told they give good presentations, but they don't remember them because they just would kind of black out because they were just so petrified of giving presentations because they were never really taught how to do it. You know, so of course we talked a lot about that, but marketing yourself and being able to present and talk about yourself, I mean, like those things go very much hand in hand. So those are really, I think, critical skills that for some reason are just completely missed, both in the undergrad and the graduate side. So
yeah, definitely. What are some things that you guys have found in your interactions with students so far? You know, we had these you know, these courses that we've designed and everything have, you know, we had this theoretical idea, right, about, you know, seeing this need out there and, you know, wanting to design these courses to fill it. Now that we've, you know, the course is the program is a few months old now, and we've been working through all of these courses now once. What are some of the experiences that you guys have had? What are some of the things that you've learned or perceived from working with students in your courses?
I'll start if you like.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, first of all, on the Mastering Media course, one of the things that really surprised me was the extent to which people really don't seem to know how to handle the internet well. And in those first interactions with first students taking this course, that was really brought home to me and to them. I think that was the biggest surprise, was for them to understand the extent to which they don't really know how to use resources, how to understand when a source is valid and when it is not valid, and what to do if you find that it's not the kind of source that you thought it was, how to, you know, how to understand that information given to you on the internet is always curated by somebody for some reason with an agenda. And understanding that is like a revelation. So I think that students start that course with an idea of what they think they might get out of that course, which is, you know, how to use the internet well so that I can find resources and use them in my job. And they get partway into it and suddenly start to realize just what it is that this information is doing to your brain if you don't understand what is going on. And just dissecting this whole thing about fake news and what truth actually is. Can you pin that word down? And understanding that a truth for somebody is not a truth for somebody else is like a shocking revelation. Right. So that is actually the first time of teaching that. That has been quite an eye-opener for me as well, is to just see the dearth of education on the media is kind of shocking to me. And because the other two courses I've taught have been on real fundamentals of writing, I'm wondering, coming back to something you said earlier, Corey, about how the humanities are not just not useless, they're actually immensely important. And I wonder if it's because all of these incredibly important skills are just taken for granted, are just kind of overlooked as being, well, you know, we assume that people do all of this. And now suddenly businesses are finding themselves in a situation where they're looking around saying, well, but people aren't doing this. We assumed that they were. What is going on? And I just wonder if it's because there's this assumption that people can do all of this stuff. And that's why it gets overlooked. Its very essential nature gets overlooked. I don't know, it's just a feeling I've had after teaching 3 courses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's like, you know, Sara, just thinking about the model of what you were saying about grammar and stuff as well, right? I mean, that's a very kind of tangible illustration of this, right? Like the actual teaching people how to, you know, how do you put sentences together? How does that work? It's not that that's never taught anywhere at any level, but we seem to be, we as educators, or the educational system as a whole, seems to be very quick to say, well, we're assuming you've already learned that, right? So we're not going to waste our time going over that stuff again. But I agree, in those places where we can see that really concretely, as in grammar and punctuation and things like that, I think it certainly stands to reason that that is equally true in so many other things. You know, that we make assumptions about some of these basics and don't really teach them. You know, this is maybe slightly tangential, but I think one of the reasons for that, one of the things that tends to lead to that problem, is teaching people fundamentals is unpleasant. That is, it's unpleasant for the student, right? Nobody wants to be told, you have to buckle down and do this work that you're not going to enjoy, right? Like, this is not fun. This is not fun time, right? This is like, it's like the, you know, the equivalent of like doing push-ups, right? This is, you know, you can't, you might like to play sports, but if you don't like train your body, you're not going to be able, you know, to do sports. Nobody wants to do, so it's almost like education in general, higher education in particular, you know, has moved into this model a long time ago of treating students like consumers, right? Like, let's try to please them, and make all the students as happy as possible. And so nobody wants to do this. Nobody wants to be like, okay, we're going to compel you to like learn all of these basic fundamental things, which you're not going to enjoy, right? We want to let you, no, we want you to have fun because we want you to, you know, so nobody wants to be the bad guy in that sense, right? And give people a hard time and say, our job as educators is to like hold you and bring you to a particular standard on these things. Even within the institution, people, you know, individual faculty are passing the buck on that, because of course individual faculty don't want to be the one to do it, because then students will hate their classes and will give them bad reviews, and then they won't get tenure, right? So I mean, all the way down, this kind of mentality of you know, nobody wants to be you know, like the classic, like the, you know, the mean teacher walking around with a ruler smacking people anymore, but like that, I'm not saying that that environment is the ideal environment for pedagogy, but again, it's, you know, if all we're doing is trying to like, you know, give people positive reinforcement and make them feel better about themselves and encourage them to have fun, it is the first thing that's going to go is exactly these kinds of basic these basics, and it's going to be easier for us to skim over these things and not compel people to do the background work, you know, the important stuff. Anyway, it's I think one of the larger kind of diseases of higher education, you know, that we're not shaping students anymore. We're entertaining customers, right, basically.
Yeah, you know, that goes right down to high school.
Yeah.
That reminds, sorry, this is just a quick comment I wanted to make. But in my previous life, I was an academic advisor, and the two key questions that we were always told we needed to be ready to answer immediately when a student walked in is, how long is it going to take and how much is it going to cost? And that was it. They didn't like, it didn't really matter what the other questions were. What am I going to learn? You know, what about the actual tenets of the education that I'm going to get? It was just, how long is this going to take and how much is it going to cost? That's it. And students want to, that's all that they want, and which is obviously a complete mistake. But it's also
that's treating students primarily as consumers, right?
Yeah.
You know, this, you know, that you're selling them a product, right? And so what they need to, you know, that's the transaction there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And which student is going to take the slice of wheat bread when they could take the big pile of chocolate, you know? So do you want to do a course on grammar and punctuation and syntax and all that kind of thing, or do you want to have fun? So,
or both.
Well,
you can do both.
You can do. I would argue it can be both. And anybody who's thinking of taking nuts and bolts, I promise you, it's a little more fun than this. But still, I get Corey's point, because students get to higher education level and they also assume they can write.
Yeah.
You know, so if somebody says, okay, stop, check the front and side view mirrors, you aren't actually a good writer yet. You also need to do this. Well, you know, that's going to be something that they don't want to hear. So they don't get told it.
So this kind of relates to what I found, which wasn't a surprise, but it was nice to have it affirmed. There was a comment in the recent Humanities Summit we had at the university, which someone said, humanities are particularly good at letting people know what they didn't know. And if you don't know something, then you don't know. And how do you know? So you have to, you know, I don't know, but you find out somehow. Through studying. And there was a comment, so I ran the two-way communication course a couple of times, once to a big group at a corporation, and I had a lovely email from one of the students who told me that initially they were really annoyed that they were being forced to do this course. And they thought, oh, for goodness sake, they're going to tell me how to communicate. They're going to tell me how to speak English. How insulting. I know how to do that. And then they said, not only was this a lot more enjoyable, but I now realize how complicated, how complex it is, but also how I can develop, where my weaknesses are, where I can see other weaknesses, where I can improve things holistically. And it reminded me, actually, there was a comment discussing English literature. There was a professor at Oxford saying how what happens, particularly with first years at undergraduate level, is that they come in and then they realize quite soon that English literature is so much more complicated, but also so much more exciting than they thought it was. People from the outside might go, okay, what do you do in English literature? You read Jane Austen and you go, right, this is what Mansfield Park means. Like, this is the message. Okay, we've done that. Let's move on. And instead, it's more like, okay, what is this? What are the interesting complications here, and what can that tell us? And let's reflect on some of these issues, and let's think about what they could mean. And so that's what we do in these courses. And we end up really developing those skills and also setting people up for the future. It's not, you know, at the end of the course, I always say, the course doesn't actually end now. The course begins now. Now you are equipped to keep on developing these skills, keep getting better at communication, get better at writing, take that forward and apply these to every situation you come across. Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day who works as an investment banker, and he did a master's in music, and he got this job as in this investment bank, and he asked them, why did you hire me? And they said, because you're seeing things that other people aren't seeing. You're filling a gap that we have. You know, we have all the kind of MBAs that we can ask for, but we don't have someone who's got that kind of different perspective that the other people don't even know they don't have. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, you know, Gabriel, one thing I would jump on there, thinking especially what you were saying about sort of the course starting now and everything. This is one of the other difficulties about this particular skill gap that we're talking about, right? Is that these skills, it's not like being trained to use a piece of software. You think about like professional development courses, right? There are, you know, millions of professional development courses out there. It's a very standard thing that you do, but usually it's about training in a particular thing, right? You're being acclimated to, you know, oriented to use a particular piece of software, or, you know, learning a new coding language or something like that. But these things that we're talking about, these foundational skills, are things that you have to work and develop over time. You can't take a weekend seminar and learn how to write, you know, and at the end of it, you'll be a good writer. Like, that, it doesn't work that way. And it's the same thing, Gabriel, with communication, right? Or Robbie, with the interpersonal stuff that you were talking about. I mean, there isn't a single seminar. It's all about trying to, and that's one of the reasons why Signum Path courses work a little differently from normal professional development. And we don't do one-shot seminars. It's not just a, watch a video, do an exercise, and that's your professional development thing. It's they're regular discussion courses. We make them short courses. We don't want to make it a massive investment of people's time, but there has to be time involved. You have to be thinking through and practicing these things and developing these things over time. And yeah, the goal is just that each little month course is just kind of a kickstart right into opening people's eyes into what they need to learn and to begin them developing the skills so that they can carry on with this development and carry on this trajectory on their own. It's a big challenge, I think, in this particular area.
But I mean, there's, as you said, there's a skills gap in the workplace, and it's a question of, well, how do we address this? Yes, Signum Path is addressing this skills gap, but the skills gap is occurring because of the way in which these skills are being taught, the way in which these skills are being approached in universities.
Yes.
With going back to what Robbie said earlier about how you are doing critical thinking, you are doing research, you are doing data recovery and things like that in your humanities course, but nobody says, by the way, you're doing that. That is a skill that you have. And so people graduate and they do have some skills, but then they don't know how to, they don't know that they have those skills because nobody said, along with reading these books or studying this period in history or understanding these philosophers or whatever it is you've studied, you have also achieved these particular skills. This skill set is yours.
Yes.
So it's not just a case of let's plug the gap in the workplace. It's how do we address what's going on in universities so that the gap in the workplace isn't as wide as it is.
Absolutely.
I think a big part of this is, and I mean, I agree with everything you just said, Sara. I think a big part of this is that by and large, most students, and I think to a degree, even instructors sometimes view classes as just like, check that box, like you did the intro course, you did this course, and that fulfills this requirement and stuff like that. And, Corey, like what you were just talking about is how, the goal is really to take these skills and like continue to practice them. This is just like giving you a little injection of what you need. And then you go out and you're supposed to practice that. I mean, that's something that I've been really trying to impart to all my students is, look, this is like a crash course, almost like we can only do so much in 1 month. You have to go out and find opportunities to practice these skills because you will lose them if you don't. And I think it's the same thing with the humanities is, there are skills that we learn in these, undergraduate courses, or graduate courses, whatever. I mean, I have, I have the dreaded job of teaching the intro to history courses, which every student hates. They don't know why they have to take it. I've taken this in. So my job is to make it relevant to them. And then also to try to help them to understand the skills that they're learning in my courses, they then take into other courses, they take into their own lives and things like that. So I think a big piece of this is just the way that we treat courses like they're just check boxes. It's just something to get done. This is something that I get done so that I get the piece of paper, then I get the piece of paper, then I can go get the job. Then once I get the job, then I get another piece of paper that has money on it, and then I can get a house. Like it's just I get this thing to get the next thing, and that's it. And that's not how it should be done.
Right, exactly.
Sorry, that was my rant.
Yeah, no, it is a big part of the problem with the mentality, and yeah, thinking about that problem. Sara, that you were just talking about the humanities not really communicating these skills and things. That was to me the kind of sobering moment, right? When I was first thinking this through and I was seeing this, like, okay, so the humanities, oh man, like the humanities are downtrodden right now. Like the humanities are being oppressed by the current, dynamics of higher education. And look, there's this desperate need for them. My first impulse was like, oh, this is great. Like, let's ride in and help save the humanities, right, from the dragons that are oppressing them. But then, of course, the more I think this through and look at this, the more I kind of came to the disquieting conclusion, well, unfortunately, one of the things that the humanities needs to be saved from is itself, right? It's not doing I mean, a lot of the damage, a lot of the difficulties that the humanities are in is kind of self-inflicted, because they're not doing a good job of showing people the usefulness of it. I mean, if what you're communicating in your degree program, right, if you're saying to your student, the point of this degree program is to be like, so for a literature program, right, the point of this, our job is to turn you into an expert in literature, right? You're going to be a literary expert at the end of this program. That's the thing we're focused on. That's the thing we're accomplishing. Then guess what? That actually is a little bit useless on the job market, right? There are very few places that are like, what we need most is somebody who has a really incisive reading of Jane Austen, right? Yeah. You're not going to see that on a whole lot of job ads, right? I mean, as far as practicality is concerned, that is actually useless. Much of the humanities is in that sense useless most of the time. But the point is, they are doing humanities programs, teaching the humanities, studying the humanities, in fact, does so much more than that, right? It's not that you're just an expert in literature or an expert in a particular historical field or something like that at the end. But the humanities programs themselves do a very bad job of packaging that and of communicating that clearly to their students, to say, hey, great, yes, we want you to become an expert, in this particular literary or historical or philosophical field or whatever it is, right? But that's not the only point, right? We want to make sure that you understand you are also gaining these remarkably applicable skills, which will enable you, which will equip you to have, not just to be able to apply for different jobs, but to really have, Gabriel, like you were saying about ways in which you can in fact package, like it's okay to have a PhD, like you can show that having a PhD in literature does in fact equip you in certain ways that make you an attractive candidate, more attractive than some other candidates, right? That's a thing, but that's a thing that in general humanities programs have been terrible at doing, at communicating to their students and at communicating to the public, so that when people see this credential, right, when they see, so Robbie, when they see your history masters, right, on your resume when you apply, they don't know what that means. They don't understand. Like, most employers don't have a way of unpacking, okay, so that means if she has a master's in history, then that means we can expect X, Y, and Z, and that's awesome, right? Most of people don't know how to do that. So that's the other thing that I think is a really important angle. And this is part of the longer term thing, right? This is a bigger and longer term project than just trying to help people right away. Sort of close some of those, develop some of those skills and be able to do better at accomplishing some of the things that they need to do, on a daily basis, or to have an office, a team working more effectively and communicating more effectively. So yeah, it's a big deal. Daisy was asking here in our questions box, and I welcome questions from others as well. Daisy was asking, what's Signum planning to do about the humanities within its own institution? Lots. They're as I said, it started with the perception of these two different needs, right? These two different issues, which are clearly linked together. The first thing, the thing we could respond to most quickly was the skills need, right? And so that's why we've begun with Signum Path. We are also working on the other problem, on developing a humanities program which does better at these things that we were talking about, that is really focused on not only teaching the humanities, it is not only teaching, helping people to become experts in literature and history and philosophy, but also focused on being an applied humanities program that really helps students understand how this stuff applies, and to begin to develop, a new generation of people who can really be equipped and Gabriel, as you're saying, know that they know and know what they don't know, right? To be able to move forward with this. So we're developing an undergraduate program, an undergraduate humanities program, which will whose goal is to try to sort of meet these needs in new ways, and to sort of blaze some new trails in the teaching of the humanities at the higher education level. As I say, that's a longer term project than the launching of Signum Path. It's going to take a couple years before we can actually open the doors and start teaching classes. Any of you who know me personally know that I always, when I see a need like this, when I see an opportunity like this, I always want to like jump out and do it right away. I would love to be like, and next month we're starting classes. That would be cool, but we can't do that. There's a lot of things that need to be put in place, both in terms of our organization and just making sure that we plan everything through and we have the program set, and in terms of reaching folks. It's one thing to open the doors and say we're going to do it, but we need to make sure that we are spreading the word about that, and that we have, we're going to need some time to be recruiting students for that. And of course, there are also other issues with credentialing and stuff. We have some hoops that we have to jump through with accreditors and stuff before we can get there, and with the state and all that kind of thing. So it's going to be a couple years before we actually launch the program, but that's something we're already working on. A sort of step along the way. Our first step along the way is a process we're underway. Gabriel mentioned the summit meeting we had last month, about a month ago now. In fact, a month ago today, come to think of it, I think, was the Humanities Summit we had, which was basically sort of a summit meeting to address the crisis in teaching the humanities. We invited humanities instructors from across the world, from across disciplines, to meet together and talk about our experiences and our concerns and our ideas for how things could move forward in more positive ways and stuff. We're now working with many of those folks who attended our summit on producing a paper, a concept paper that will describe, here's what an applied humanities program would look like. Here's what the sort of next generation of higher education approach to this, kind of breaking out of some of the less useful patterns that the humanities have either been forced into by the markets or have locked themselves into through other traditions. Articulating some ways in which that could come out, and then after we're gonna publicize that paper and hope to continue some sort of broader public discussions about that. And then in the meantime, we're also going to be working on our own implementation of some of these principles and begin to be moving forward with that, again, with the goal, hopefully, the vision there of ideally opening for enrollment in fall 2022. I think that's the soonest we can do it, but that's what I would like to see. So anyway, yeah, so this is definitely a bigger project that Signum is working on right now, and which I am very, very excited about. But I am very glad that we can begin already with Signum Path, because again, there is an immediate need, and for everyone who's already had their undergraduate education, it's not too late. It's not too late to go back and make up some of this ground and to begin to understand better the kinds of things that you don't know, and to be finding places where you can be filling in those skills and developing how to do that. Excellent. Well, I don't want to keep people after time. Happy to answer any final questions that come in. Any final thoughts from you guys? Final thoughts or reflections?
I have one. I mean, this path has sort of reaffirmed my love for the humanities, and if I may, I don't think there is a crisis in the humanities themselves. It's a crisis around the humanities, and it's a blip as well. I mean, if you look at the skills that employers say they are looking for in graduates and people to employ. It's a
Right.
who's who list of the humanities and Signum Path's courses as well. But also it maps pretty much onto what the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans called the 7 liberal arts.
Yes.
Which now the liberal arts means useless, non-vocational things. But back then, for the Romans and the Greeks, this was what you had to do in order to get ahead. You had to speak well, you had to communicate, you had to be able to read and understand and make arguments and so on. We're not any different. We haven't evolved so much in 2,000 years. No. And actually, it's quite emotional, actually, teaching, influencing your audience, in which we look at some of the things that Cicero and Confucius and Aristotle say. We put them in a modern context and we apply them to modern thinkers. But, the mistakes that corporations are making sometimes that cost tens of thousands of dollars. Read Aristotle, read Cicero. They tell you not to do those things. And it's true that the people who don't read history, aren't aware of history, are doomed to repeat it. And we need to go back a little bit in order to go forward, I think.
Absolutely.
Good point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it is the need for the liberal arts, and especially the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, just as essential now as ever they were. And it does seem that that's where, if there's a thing that modern education has really kind of lost its grip on, it's there. It's on those the importance on the emphasizing the importance of those key fundamentals. And yeah, it is really fun to be getting back to that. And I agree. I mean, this problem that the modern world has been developing, this is a blip. We as a species have handled this before, and we can handle it again in fact, some very similar ways. So yeah, I think that's an important reflection. Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks to our guests, Robbie, Sara, and Gabriel. I appreciate all of your time, not only of course here today, but your efforts in teaching our Path courses. I know that the students have been responding to those very, very favorably. So I know lots of people have been really valuing that that experience, and certainly anyone who is interested in more information on our Path program should definitely go to our website, path.signumu.org, to find more information on our Path program, and be looking for more information about our further adventures in the humanities as we continue moving forward with that. Again, look for that concept paper that we're working on is something we're hoping to be publishing within the next couple months here. So we should have some more discussions soon on some of that material. So thanks very much everybody for joining us, and we will see you guys later. Bye now.
Bye everyone.